the game has been a viable, successful to an extent esport for going on 3 years now. It's been played at tournaments. People travel for the game. It is an esport. The potential for it to be a bigger thing than it is, that's where you start to get into real debates that are interesting.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
what is really the ceiling for Pokemon Go PvP?
Welcome back for another amazing episode of the Third Shield Pokemon Go PvP podcast. Guys, today I have an amazing guest for you. This has been very, very overdue. The name who is here today is Alfindeol himself. Alfindeol, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, Daniel. I'm really excited to finally actually get to do something together. It's been a long time coming, and I'm really happy to be here, and I appreciate you having me on.
Same, 100%. And guys, by the way, if you don't know who Alfindeol is, don't forget, we're going to link him in below. All the details are below, but first you need to listen and watch to the podcast, and then you can go do all your research. But the reason why I want to have Alfindeol, a few reasons. So he's an amazing content creator on Twitch and on YouTube. So you're going to be able to binge on his content once this podcast is over, I guarantee you. He's very versed, and he's very good at explaining things and very good at debating things. So I really wanted to have him on the podcast because I was talking about the other day about basically esports in the future, and everybody is super positive, I feel like, in it. And Alfindeol is not being negative about it. That's not the right word to say it, but he has a really good perspective of it that I wanted to bring out on the podcast. And that's why I really wanted to have you on the podcast to talk about later on. And then in the meantime, of course, I just wanted to get to know you a little bit better before we dig deep into it. And the first question I actually wanted to ask you is just basically, how do you like this season so far, this interlude season of Go Battle League?
Yeah, so I think the most important thing to know about me as a battler and as a content creator and as somebody sort of in the Pokemon Go influencer sphere is that I'm a retired tryhard. I was a really competitive battler for the first season of Sylph PvP before GBL was a thing. I was absolutely obsessed with it. The sorts of folks that you see right now who are like, Pokemon Go PvP is the best thing since sliced bread. I love it. I want to spend all my time battling. That was me. I've lived that. And I sort of came to terms with my own relationship with the game and decided that I wasn't really enjoying that level of competitive play. I still love the PvP feature and I still engage with it more, probably daily, but I sort of took a more casual approach to how I do that. I'm a content creator that doesn't worry about whether or not I hit legend, for example, every season. I do on occasion, but I will frequently skip battles if I'm not feeling like that I'm having a great day or if I'm just not enjoying it. My ultimate goal is just to have fun with it. With that context in mind, I actually love this season. I think the season's great. I think it's great from a battler with a little bit of ADD like I have, which is to say that 2 weeks in any one format is too long. I just don't like playing the same format for 2 weeks. And like, for example, this format we just went through, which is Ultra League and Catch Cup. I have no interest in Catch Cup. I don't think it's a particularly good GBL format. And Ultra League, well, it's not the best format. A week of open Ultra League is fine. I enjoy it. I've had a really good time trying new stuff out, playing stuff. I haven't played a ton of it, but it's gone on Tuesday, and that's perfect for me because it means next Tuesday I'll have 2 new formats to play around with. If one of them or both of them aren't particularly good, it's only a week. And when we get those 2 weeks rotation, sometimes it can be very frustrating to be like, I don't really enjoy the formats I have, and now it's 2 whole weeks. There are some arguments either way, but I love this. I also have been a strong vocal proponent of changing GBL in general to be more appealing to the broader Pokemon Go base. This is something we'll dive into when we talk about sort of growing the feature and potentially how does Pokemon Go PvP grow from where it is. And I think getting people to engage in the feature beyond just those of us who are really dedicated to it is really important. And this season structure, where all of the rewards are available essentially for play, you don't actually need to win 60% of your games over a lengthy season. You just need to play enough to get your wins, to get to rank 20 and get all your rewards, is actually a structure I think they should consider permanently. I think that for the average player, the ones that engage with the feature infrequently, the chance of them being able to get their rewards, their cosmetics, a Pika Libre once a season, just for simply playing, is actually really good for the game and will get more people to engage with the feature. So I think it's a win. I know that for more competitive and leaderboard players, there's a little bit of the lacking there, right? There's sort of this, what am I playing for? But I have been an outspoken proponent that if being on the leaderboard is the only reason you play this feature, I don't really know why you play it. I think it's a great feature. I enjoy it. Obviously, I make content on it, but I play it because it's fun. And if it wasn't fun, I wouldn't play it. And so to me, I always, one of the places I always sort of butt heads with other folks is on this sort of topic of like, this should be a feature that you enjoy. And if you're doing it and not enjoying it, you shouldn't be doing it. There's not enough of a prize at the end of this right now, in my opinion, to warrant doing something that you find genuinely unfun. It might be hyperbolic maybe on social media that people say like, I hate everything. That's part of what you do. But at the same time, like if that's how you feel, I really, really am a strong proponent of taking breaks and taking breathers and doing it when it's fun and when you like it, and when it's not fun and you don't like it, don't do it.
This should be mainly Go Battle League on one side, and then let's say there's a competitive side, just like every other game where you could choose between the two, right? I mean, what do you think about that? Do you think that would be better or no?
I think that there is merit to that idea. Although I don't actually know that you really need to separate them in much ways. I mean, part of what the matchmaking system they have in place, where it's going to use your skill. I mean, that's what your matchmaking ranking is, to match you. It sort of should already kind of separate folks into those buckets, right? If you are playing more casually and you're, at 1700 MMR, you're going to be playing players who are more like you. And if you're more competitive and you're at 3600, you're gonna be playing players more like you. And it sort of already kind of stretches and separates that out. My perspective has always been on this, that the dedicated battlers are going to battle. And I don't want to say, and because I know I'll catch flack for this, that there shouldn't be some carrots for them, that there shouldn't be some reward, some actual incentive for that. But I do believe, generally speaking, that the biggest carrot for those players will simply be the game working and improving and being a fun competitive experience. And I think if you're looking to develop reward-based carrots, they should be developed for players who engage with the feature less frequently. For players who are like your raid group that you talked about, where they're like, I play on occasion and they like this season because it's an opportunity to get a Libre, and they're more of the collector side. I like the idea of having an area for competitive play. I like the idea of pushing and rewarding and engaging those of us who care about the game on a more competitive level. But I also think that for the most part, we're the kind of players that new features probably will appeal to us anyway. If they don't appeal to the more casual battler, you risk really further segmenting us away from the rest of the game, which I don't think is their intent or a healthy way for sort of the community to build around this.
So Niantic is one of the most successful companies as far as profit and loss goes right now, and how fast they've grown and everything. Well, all thanks to Pokemon, because we all know the other games that didn't, work out. But what I wanted to bring up with this is you made a good point about even with Pokemon, that they are not about the gaming and, it's more about entertainment, engagement, and all that. So same with Niantic. The reason I wanted to bring this up and start talking about this is because even if you just pull up your phone right now and look at the shop, if they would have made their money mainly, from us, like, all the what we engage and buy and the coins and all that, that would be like the most impressive shop right there.
Right.
And the three bundles that haven't changed for 6 years or whatever, would constantly change and have different values, sales, and all that crap, because that's where they would make their money. But that just goes to show you, just like what you said, it's Niantic making most of their money from outside of us. But of course, they get a good chunk from us. I wish they would actually share, but they don't have to because they're not a public company.
Right.
But if we could see their actual, profit and loss statement, I would be super interested in that, because that would actually tell us where we actually stand.
Yeah, and there's definitely there's a lot to unpack there. My relationship with Niantic is slightly different than a lot of content creators as well. You've had some on the program, I know, because I know Zoe was on that long ago, and a few others. But as a member of their content creator program, I do get a little bit of additional access and sort of effort and level of communication with them. I have a lot more opportunities to talk to them directly and to hear folks who've worked on the game directly sort of talk about it. I frequently push back against claims that they make their decisions primarily based on game revenue. Do I think game revenue is a factor in decision making? Of course it is. They're a business. This is capitalism. That's how it works. But a lot of what they do, and this is sort of where you get into this, is all what we call vision based. They have a vision for the kind of game they're making, right? They believe that they're making this sort of social exploration game. They firmly believe in their goals and their mission. And, we're seeing a lot of interesting stuff happen with that because the pandemic forced them out of that. It forced them to simply go into what I would call survival mode. Same with, the businesses I was in before I was a full-time content creator. I worked in the bar industry, and obviously our business basically vanished. And so we went into survival. We did all sorts of things that for many years we had said we would never do because you have to survive. And Niantic did the same thing. They pushed bonuses, they pushed changes, they pushed features that would have never probably been pushed outside of the pandemic. And now what we're seeing is them trying to bring that back to their vision. The problem, which everyone sort of can see, is that their vision often conflicts with the reality of how the game is played and what the game needs for it to be accessible for certain players. And every time we see them make an adjustment to bring the game closer to their vision, and that conflicts with accessibility, that is where we start to see these sort of movements and these sort of pushbacks when it comes to community length, when it comes to incense duration and effect, when it comes to stop interaction. You see those because their vision and their decision making based on vision doesn't always actually produce the best gameplay. And so anytime we run into that, we will see that. So I've said it before and I say it again, people like to tongue-in-cheek joke about remote raid passes and whether or not remote raid passes are going to go away. I can't tell you if they will, but would I be surprised if sometime in the next 6 months we see either a massive overhaul to remote raiding to put it into a position where it's frankly no longer particularly viable, or the entire removal of the feature? I don't think it's impossible. Because it doesn't line up with their vision. I think that there's probably more to it than that. I do think revenue is probably a factor in this discussion, but I bet you there are people at Niantic who, if they were in control of the game, would choose to remove the remote raid feature entirely.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And and even if they wouldn't, they would probably nerf it to, just like you said, to a lower existence that almost like is just like it's like a feel good addition to the raiders who are in there, as that 5 comes in and it's like, and they don't do much. They just participating basically, the point.
Yeah, I'm expecting I've made this prediction on stream before. Here's how I'm expecting the next 6 months to go with that. I think we're going to finally see the long awaited damage nerf to remote raiding. Right now we still have bonus damage in remote raids. I think what we're going to do is we're going to see that nerf come into play. That nerf is going to make remote raiding as a group of 5 extremely difficult. Right now, doing a tier 5 raid with 5 remote raiders is fairly practical. Some of them are difficult. If you do something like a defense deoxys and you're not prepared, it can be hard. I think we're going to see it get nerfed to the point where it starts to become challenging. And then what we're going to see is people complaining because they're doing remote raids through something like a Discord server or through Pokebattler, and it's going to be hard for a lot of people to do it. And then it's going to become a customer service issue, and then it's going to go away. I think there's a long game potentially there that comes into play, because I think once you really make raiding harder, the value of remote raid passes goes down, and I think eventually we see them potentially vanish because of that. It shouldn't be the plan, but I have a feeling that that's going to be the result of a nerf to damage, because there's going to be certain groups of people and certain players who simply won't be able to utilize a remote raid pass on a tier 5 raid if you nerf the damage significantly.
Yeah, and a good point to that, all of that, because, you know, if you use Go Raid Party, which is an amazing app if you want to raid from all over the world and remotely, from the convenience of your home, you know, which Niantic has a huge problem with, that, you know, you're supposed to play outside, go out and move and all that. That's why they nerfed the incense and all that, just like you said, what they believe, you know. So obviously I can definitely see that coming in the near future. And when a new Pokemon releases, if you go to Go Raid Party, the app even says, oh, you're having a hard time getting into the raid? Well, that's because there's like 75,000 people getting into the raids. So that's a lot of online raiders that are not in person raiding every single second of the game. You know what I mean? Yeah. That's a huge, that would be a huge change,
And as unpopular a stance as this is, look, I've been saying the same thing about nerfing incense. I've said the same thing about community days. These changes, for those of us who play in large local communities, if you live in an area where you had a local community pre-pandemic, these changes have been net negative for that community aspect. I see less people out. I see less people at raids. I see less people at community days. I saw less people at things like spotlight hours. And I'm starting to see more of them as these changes come in. It'll be interesting to see what the first 3-hour community day looks like for that. Remote raiding is probably the number one thing that has prevented me from seeing other people. Our local Discord servers where we used to coordinate raids are all ghost towns. They don't exist. The only time I'll ever see in-person raiders is for raid hours, because we have kind of a established starting point and end point that people will jump on. But even that, pre-pandemic, there'd be 35, 40 people at that first raid. Now we're lucky to have 6. And those raids are full. I see people in those raids who I know used to be there, and they're just remote raiding from home. And I think ultimately there's a really strong argument that if Niantic truly wants to say, we are designing this game for this specific thing, remote raiding has to go. The problem is just like these other things, designing the game for me and how I play isn't actually maybe what they should be doing, because I'm the type of player who has access. I'm the type of player who can do this. And the only people who are truly, utterly, really hurt by removing remote raiding are folks who don't have access to a local community to raid with. If you're a rural player, if you're a player who lives in a small city or an area that doesn't have a lot of gyms, you're the one who's now suddenly going to lose access. And for me, removing remote raiding is an inconvenience. I like remote raiding. I enjoy it on occasion. I don't do a lot of it, but I can. And if there's a boss I really want to do, it's nice to be able to sync up with my online community and do 20 or 30 or 50 defense deoxys, as opposed to maybe the 15 I could do in person over the course of the release. But it doesn't hurt me that much. What it ends up doing is it hurts people who are disabled, who can't leave their homes. It hurts people who live in rural areas. It hurts access. And as much as for me, I can say it wouldn't make much of a difference, that doesn't mean that's what should happen, right? And I think that that's sort of a thing that is very much on the tip of people's tongues. It's on the forefront of their minds with these most recent changes. And I know that Niantic has heard this feedback. I know that they internally are aware, and they are sort of grappling with how do we address this in a way that makes it so that a player like me is still incentivized to play the game the way they intend, but a player who lives, 40 miles outside of Seattle where I live can still enjoy the game themselves in a meaningful way. And I don't think they have an easy solution to that. I know everyone is always like, the easy solution is make incense 3 hours again, but it's not, because the answer are not 3 hours, but like spawn every minute. Because what happens is players like me stop going out for spotlight hours. Why am I going to go out for spotlight hour? I can just throw an incense on and I'm good. Like, and I think like finding the balance between where the game works for them and isn't broken for me is a much more challenging puzzle to solve than people want to give it credit for. And I think that that's where Niantic's vision for the game, what players want and need, it butts heads. And I think at some point, one of those things has to give. And the I've said this a couple times, people have asked me, the wild card here is TPCI, which we're going to talk about a bit when we get to competitive play. If they at some point come around to the idea that Pokemon Go isn't best served by Niantic's vision, and Pokemon Go best serves the Pokemon franchise at large by being the easily accessed, casual way to engage Pokemon fans, you can start seeing the pressure from that side potentially push Niantic to make the game more, say, playable from home. Because at the end of the day, that's what the like, you're not going to be able as a community likely to facilitate much change on some of these things, because simply put, it doesn't align with their vision. And we just don't have the data access to be like, here's a point by point refute of your plan. They learned that from the spin distance thing. They came at us with no data to back up their plan, and they got dumped on. At the very least, they're at least trying to use data. We all know that the 3% data point is probably not the correct one. But I appreciate that they at least have tried. I guess that's all I can say about it.
Yeah, no, that sentence when they put all the data in there, that was the most vague data analysis I ever seen in my life. By the way. That was the feedback I gave them too, and it was all my thoughts on this are very public. They're very much on Twitter. The 3 hours doesn't make a huge difference for me, but I don't think it's how. When they told us that, I'm like, cool, but here's 3 points. One, okay, but what percentage of players played in different windows? That data point's not helpful, right? It just isn't. Secondly, that data point is the data point from a world with the pandemic and bonus incense. This is the first community day with the new incense. So to make this change based on a pandemic's worth of stuff, you're changing like 4 things for this. It's gonna have a huge impact on the way Stuffle is played. Stuffle is gonna be very different from every other community day, but they've set themselves up to win by data, right? They've set themselves up with a new Mon with a new shiny that has a 400 candy evolution, as well as the fact that incense won't work the way that it used to. All those things together mean that, you know what you're going to see for Stuffle? You're going to see a lot of players out there grinding Stuffle. And I just think that, like, I don't believe or buy into the like nefarious Niantic planned this all along thing, but I also want them at least somewhere to admit that the data that they have used and the data they're about to receive are going to be impacted by circumstances outside of just 6 hours. 6 hours is not the only way to cross-section this data. And I would be very curious after, say, 3 or 4 months to see where we're at. There'll also be summer community days, which tend to be widely played. I just think the data analysis, they heard, please use data to back up your decisions. And then they just picked one data point and used it to back up the decision. And it just doesn't look like they did their work. Yeah, no. And you know, exactly what you said, it's 2 different genre, basically. I can't really be comparable that what we're gonna see. And then you just said they set it up perfectly how well this is gonna play this community day. And I just really hope they're not going to, after the community day, they're not going to put out all this data and I know, say, right? See, we told you. Yeah, I really hope that's not what they're gonna do. My plan, at least on the feedback when I give it, is like, you know, Stuffle Day. This is I've like already written my feedback. Stuffle Day was a lot of fun. I did see more members of my community out. Good work. Please do not treat this as a proof that this was the exact right choice.
let's wait and see what additional data says, because there's just too many things going on with Stuffle beyond just 6 versus 3 hours for them to make all of their determinations on that. I really do think that they need to consider other additional factors. And I do think they need to consider other additional formats for community days. I think that the stupid thing about this, in my estimation, is community days are stale events. We've been playing the same community day in the same format for 4+ years. It's boring. And it highlights the fact that the only thing that matters is the mon. And they can be like, well, now you're seeing more of your community. Community matters. I'm like, yeah, but you're not giving us real features that highlight that. They're making some efforts. They are doing things like increasing trades. They're doing things like the new play together feature, which I don't think is at its final iteration, but I really love the idea of like, hey, if you're together around a lure and you all catch Pokemon, you get more bonuses. I think they could do some neat stuff with that. I just don't think it's impressive yet. I still think there's a lot of other things they could do. My big fight for the next couple months is I'm going to try and convince them to take the special tag off of the community day shiny, so that you can trade as many of the community day shiny as you want on the day. Because ultimately that alleviates the whole, I have too many of these, I don't want to delete them thing that we all run into. And it also will encourage you to interact with your community. Trading is a really good community feature. I like that they've started to apply trading bonuses. It's something that I wish people would do more of. But I would really love to see them consider like, hey, what if on the day of you could do more lucky trades that way as well? Because you don't feel bad about lucky trading for the community day mon. At least it's like a decent way to burn one. I just think it's a really nice way to address a number of complaints that people have about community days and encourage people to interact with their local community.
About 2 years ago, when before pandemic, I jumped on this because I saw King Ivy and Poke AK building it out as a test run from Niantic, and I thought, when I saw that, I was like, oh, there is something here. So that's when I jumped on it and started creating content for that reason. So my idea and what burned into my mind that esports will happen down the road, that was my belief. Now we're getting closer. So what was yours like 2 years ago? Were you thinking something like that? And what do you think today?
Yeah, so I remember that showcase, and I definitely remember that being a huge deal. So Pokemon Go PvP, obviously, like I know most listeners probably have the history lesson down, but Pokemon Go PvP, I'll give like the cliff notes, was more or less added to the game. I'm gonna even say kind of like as almost like, hey, here's a new feature. To me, it feels very much like something that was thrown together in like as a tech demo, that they were like, the game needs a battle feature, and then they had like one of those a design sprint for it, where they just like, hey, what if somebody submitted this and somebody built it and submitted it, and they're like, this is kind of fun, and they just threw it in the game. And the second it dropped, a section of Pokemon Go players was like, yo, hold up, this is fun. And I remember the first couple weeks it was out, everyone was trying it, and then that group kind of narrowed as we started to like learn the strategy. I remember throwing a Flygon at people in the first week of play, and they would just shield 2 Dragon Claws, and then you would run over their team, because people didn't understand any of the mechanics. They weren't really sure how any of it worked, and it was really interesting. And immediately Silpharina sort of popped up and started running tournaments, and around that a really great community of people came together and has been, you know, pushing it. For me, my initial thoughts were, this is fun, I'll play tournaments in this, I like this. It wasn't until I started seeing other people be enthusiastic about it, and that the Silpharina community had sort of grown, that I was like, there might actually be something here. And I've been pretty optimistic about it. I played very, very hard for that first year of PvP. That first season of Silpharina, I was a member of a number of high value testing groups. I was top tiered on Go Stadium when they were basically the only way to do remote tournaments. I finished season 1 of Silph. My peak ranking was well in the top 100. I think I finished like 212 in the world or something like that. But I found at the end of the season, I was burned way out. I was unhappy I've used this quote a lot. This is a quote from a college football coach, but winning was a relief and losing was devastating. I didn't like losing. I hated losing. Winning didn't ever feel good. It just felt like I was like, oh, good, I did the thing I expected to do. And it took sort of a back seat in that. I really loved watching the mega tournaments sort of sprout and grow. Those were a really good sign. I think the first time I ever really believed Pokemon Go PvP might be something is that the first mega, which isn't technically a mega, but the first mega was an event called the Cascadia Clash, which happened here in Seattle. And we had players from Vancouver and Portland come to Seattle, and we did the first sort of mega tournament. And it was by far the largest tournament outside of South America at the time. And to see people like the Portland players, like all like rented basically vans and like bust up, and everybody there and everyone was pretty hyped. Like, this is actually pretty cool. Worlds was a great showcase. You know, you started seeing all these mega tournaments. And then when GBL dropped, it was like, they clearly noticed. And it still felt kind of like there might be a future here. I've always looked at Pokemon Go's competitive future in the way that I look at Nintendo game competitive futures. Not in the way I think people hear esports and they think about stuff like CSGO, and they think about League of Legends, think about like arenas full of people and millions of dollars in cash prizes. I don't think that's ever been actually the ceiling for Pokemon Go. I don't think that's ever going to happen, because I think the bar, the absolute ceiling is Pokemon TCG and Pokemon VGC. And you can look at those play Pokemon tournaments and see kind of what that looks like. Because at any point, the absolute final deciding say in Pokemon Go PvP's competitive future is going to be the Pokemon Company. Niantic can push for it. They can do everything they can to make it look competitive and interesting. But at the end of the day, it's unlikely that they would allow Pokemon Go to, say, exceed the main series competitive play unless something drastic changes. The thing that's most interesting, and we can talk about this in a different thing, is how Unite is structured. Unite clearly has a different arrangement with the Pokemon Company than Pokemon Go does, because they're running their own stuff outside of Play Pokemon. And that is actually kind of an interesting thing that I wasn't sure we'd ever see. But there is something to be said about that. Does open some doors, maybe just a crack, that there is something, if that really does take off and sort of starts to land in some of the larger esports arenas. But it'll be very interesting to see how that goes. Ultimately, to me, this rotation of Pokemon Go at regionals and worlds is a little bit of a make or break moment for the game. The Liverpool regional, we got good feedback on, but turnout was kind of low. I know that there's factors other than just the game, but compared to the other stuff, turnout was fairly low. I'm going to be very interested to see what turnout looks like for the other things, because at some point, Play Pokemon has to believe that there's a big enough audience for this for them to want to put the time, energy, and effort into continuing to include it. And while the community has shown up, even our largest mega tournaments are not that impressive compared to the kind of people who participate and the numbers that participate in a VGC or a TCG regionals. It doesn't mean that we have to reach that, but we do have to kind of, they're going to want to see growth in it. And the game is going to need to improve. Yeah, I mean, my perspective on it has always been that I like it. I think that there's something here, and there's definitely something appealing about Pokemon Go PvP. The biggest hurdles for me are essentially accessibility. Or essentially doing what you did. And that's kind of my follow-up is like, so you saw it at Worlds and said, that actually looks pretty dope. I want to get into this and try and get on board with this. How easy was it for you to go from this looks dope to actively playing at even, I don't even want to say at a competitive level for your skill set, at a competitive level for your actual account progression? Like, I just worry right now that the bridge from I saw Pokemon Go PvP and it looks dope to I play Pokemon Go PvP is just almost an unsurmountable starting point for anybody. No one in their right mind, because we're both insane, clearly, is going to go, oh, I like that, I want to play it, see what it would take to get to that level and go, yeah, we're gonna skip that.
What I wanted to bring up is a really good point, and I'm testing it and trying to build content on this, since you mentioned on getting into it from day one. For example, my wife just got into Pokemon Go like forever, like I mean for the first time, like a week ago. So and now she just did her first, Team Rocket stuff and that kind of stuff. So she thinks she's battling, and all that kind of stuff, and which is cute. And then and then we're gonna do on stream, like live together battle for the first time, like a first reveal, her first experience. And I told her until then, don't even try it. So just to see her first reaction as a person who know nothing about Pokemon and Pokemon Go. So it will be interesting to see. And then I'm gonna want to create like sections on it that how her could go from here and to there and how it got there, because she'll be a perfect example, because that's going to be like the main audience we eventually would get introduced to. If let's say Ninja or these big name players would jump on it and say, I want to stream this, host a tournament, then all their fans, just like you said, they're going to see, oh shit, I want to do this. And then they look up and they see, oh yeah, never mind, I'm streaming with Fortnite.
They set up the game and they go, I want to battle, and it goes, first what you're gonna need to do, and they're like, wait, how long is this list of things? And that's not to say that like to be a god tier Fortnite player is like an overnight thing, but when it comes to having at least the resources to do it, like you can more or less start playing those games and then immediately start honing your competitive skills, because you have, I know some of these games have various grind mentalities and things that you unlock and that sort of stuff. But for the most part, the difference between something like, CSGO or League of Legends or Pokemon Unite is that you can more or less start the game and immediately you're doing something that resembles what you were immediately sold on, right? Pokemon Go is not that. And this is one of the things that I think I think one of the most interesting topics around competitive play and Go is when it comes to a level playing field, when it comes to level of access for certain mons and certain resources. And the thing that I think is always forgotten in this equation, and the thing that I always come back to when I talk about that specific topic, is that at its core, Pokemon Go is not a competitive game. The battle mode on Pokemon is essentially tacked on to a game. And that game has its own needs when it comes to, and we can talk about this with Salazzle. This is a great place to discuss this. The core game of Pokemon Go has a certain set of needs when it comes to driving interest and continued sort of play. And sometimes those will butt heads with what competitive play needs. And so far, for the most part, what the core game needs has overridden what PvP needs. And I don't necessarily think that there's not some happy mediums, but I also think that sometimes we forget that at its core, the kind of game Pokemon Go is not a fair game. It's probably never going to be a truly fair game unless they have a total change of heart about what is important to Pokemon Go. We're always going to be battling in a scenario where you may not have exactly what you want, and you have to make the best of it. Or you always have to grind a certain kind of event because you won't be able to. I don't think they want you to be able to simply stop playing the core game and play 100% as a battler.
And I see both sides, and I agree with you 100% with what you said. And the only thing that I kind of like, and I know lots of people against this that I always say, is that I just love the idea, because I feel like I'm living my childhood, is that, Ash Ketchum gets up and then starts out with one single Pokemon, and then he doesn't start battling technically until he catches up and builds his team, right? Yeah. So maybe the battle feature or the esports feature should be a separate app from the actual Pokemon Go.
Yeah, so like. I have said this before, and I kind of agree with it. I think there is, like, the core gameplay elements of Pokemon Go PvP are pretty good. They're fun. They're simple. There is room for depth and strategy. Now, I have said, so I watched a lot of the Salt Lake City Regional for VGC. I've not watched a ton of VGC, but they broadcast it and I was very interested in it. And I've always been a big proponent of Pokemon Go PvP being a pretty fun game. It has a little bit more depth and strategy than people give it credit for, but it's also still a wildly simple game. It's still extremely straightforward. Even the comparison I say, which is that it plays kind of like a fighting game as opposed to a strategy game, is still pretty wildly simple. I worry at some point the deficiencies of it will catch up. My biggest argument for that is that, you know, most games that you could program an AI to play at 100% efficiency don't really make for great competitive games. But there's exceptions. Obviously, chess is one of those big exceptions, right? Where you know, there's a lot going on there. But chess is also a much more strategically in-depth game that requires a lot more. Pokemon Go, in many ways, can be solved. There are absolute optimal play patterns in matchups. Executing them is a thing, of course, but like it is a little bit of a deterministic game, which it'll be interesting to see how that develops. I do think that this is known, and I think adding strategic complexity to Pokemon Go is something that is of interest to Niantic, because it will appeal to those of us who have spent a lot of time learning the game. But like, I really think that ultimately Pokemon Go exists as a complete entity. If you wanted to make the best version of PvP, splitting it out of Pokemon Go, making its own game is probably the way to do it. That's just not all that interesting a game. And I think you sort of nailed it, which is that Pokemon Go is this fantasy version of Pokemon where you are a Pokemon trainer. The real world is the Pokemon world. You got to be the best there very was. And when we talked to them about PvP in one of our listening sessions, this is from the team. I'm pretty sure I can share this. This is an anecdote I really like to share from one of the executive producers game. We talked about sort of parity and equitability in Pokemon Go PvP. And he said, we don't imagine the best Pokemon Go battler is the one who has best mastered battling. That is a component. But we believe the best Pokemon Go PvP trainer is the one who's mastered the game. They know the events. They play the correct events. They grind their IVs. They look for the right Pokemon. They master the battle mechanics. They are doing all of this. And we don't want the end all be all to be, you can just be the best at the feature. We want it to be a holistic part of the game in general. And this is where it goes back to the idea that the core game of Pokemon Go isn't PvP. That's a side game. And obviously they have invested in it more than I think many of us ever thought they would. And I'm really glad to see that they continue to do that. But at the end of the day, divorcing what happens in PvP away from the core game is just not their vision. And this is again where vision and the needs of the game butt heads. And there are two ways about it. You can keep fighting that fight, and I do think it's worth fighting, and I do bring it up all the time that there's got to be a happy medium. But I also think that there should be, for serious battlers, something in your head that goes, you know what? I know that at its core, this game is never going to truly be totally 100% fair. I have to try and love what I do love about it, and not maybe spend all my time worried about whether or not my Skarmory has exactly the perfect IVs. Maybe what I need to figure out is where I can find some fun in this and know, you know, I do this all the time because I run a lot of suboptimal stuff because I just like to. And every now and then, like, I'll win CMP and be a matchup like, yeah, this person went out grinding and they're gonna lose to me because of it. And like, I just think that like in some ways you just have to like, you have to embrace the whole game and embrace how PvP fits into that game. And I think if you do that, will develop a much healthier relationship with it. Because I just don't believe that we're ever going to see a world where Pokemon Go PvP is the core Pokemon Go game. It doesn't go.
it almost sounds like basically like if when becomes esports, because of these advantages, disadvantages, the log based and all those things, I almost feel like, and some people are gonna hate this idea, but it almost feels like that, just like you said, Pokemon Go Battle League is not like the main game, it's a side game of it, or off, or well, that's what you collect for technically. So you know what I mean?
Right.
So, but you need all these other things aligned and grinded, from the events to locations to yada yada yada, to able to compete at the highest level. And I like it in a way, as an ex-athlete, I just like it in a way that, you know, same thing, when I played hockey, I had to go swimming, I had to go running, I had to have nutrition right, I had to have a coach, and all these things. And again, lots of people are gonna be like, yeah, but it's a game. And I understand that, but we, again, talking about like a professional side of the game. So I kind of like it in a way, just because like the sport inside of me is, I feel like that there's a connection that I can make with this. And I also understand why it's not fair, because you cannot log in like Fortnite, and you know, you technically have equal terms, versus the other people you don't. But it's I don't know. For me, it's like I see both sides, and I constantly like this with it, because I like both ways. Yeah. And I would be okay with both. Honestly, I'm okay with both.
I'll give you a controversial competitive PvP take. The best tournament they've ever run was the Twitch Rivals tournament, which was a catch cup.
Yeah. Well, because
I actually, I kind of feel like the ultimate Pokemon Go PvP format is some version of catch cup. It's something like an 8-hour grind fest, right? They give you an account. It's a generic level 40 account with some resources. Everyone has the same ones. And then they give you a zoned area where everyone has access to the same spawns and zones. Say we play within this city limits. And then you have 8 hours to go catch your team. And then you show up and you battle. And like, to me, that is the perfect encapsulation of a Pokemon Go PvP experience, because it's going to take all of your skills to make sure that you're targeting the right stuff, as well as your ability to quickly appraise and assess, to put something together on the fly using, like, to me, that's always been the most fun way to play Pokemon Go. I love that. I think that sort of does everything. There's obviously a lot to respect and value about constructed. I use these terms. I play Magic the Gathering as one of my other hobbies, and they have two formats. They have a constructed format and a limited format. Constructed is you bring your deck, right? You bring your stuff. You know what it is. You've been practicing. You probably know a lot of what your opponent's doing. It's a massive skill, but it ends up being the skill frequently ends up being, how well have you practiced your patterns? How well do you know what you're supposed to do when you encounter this specific thing? And that's a lot like an open Great League pick six or choose three, bring six tournament, right? You've practiced against the meta. You know your matchups. You do that. A limited format in those games is you open a pack of cards and you build decks. And it becomes much more about your ability to take in the entire game and improvise and deal with situations that you've never encountered before, and really take your full mastery of the game and apply it in a way that helps you win. And I love that. And that's one of the things that I've always loved about battling, is I love improvising. I love seeing novel and new situations. When auto recommended was a format, and that used to be the only thing. I've been streaming Pokemon Go on Twitch since before Go Battle League. So we used to have to come up with things to stream. You couldn't just stream a bunch of self tournaments. There just wasn't enough content there. And you would just throw down with viewers, and we would do auto recommended when that format really worked. And you would get all sorts of weird novelty situations, like, oh snap, I really don't know what Seviper's one shield matchup with Grumpig is, but we're gonna find out. And like, the ability to sort of like improvise and play, to me, has always been Pokemon Go at its purest form. It's always been the thing that I like the best about it. And my boomer take, to an extent, as much as PvPoke is the most essential element of competitive Pokemon Go play at this point, the time before PvPoke and the time before the one shield sim was really a great time for Pokemon Go PvP, from just an experiential version. And as players get better and better and better about knowing and learning their matchups via that sort of experience, the more the game becomes this sort of like quasi-deterministic you know, it drives a little bit of that away. So I love drafts. Draft is a great format as well for that, where you see a lot of matchups you maybe have not practiced. But generally speaking, for me, the competitive future I wish to see for Pokemon Go looks more like that, and looks a little less like just open Great League tournaments. I know there's a lot to respect there. I hope people don't take this as me saying that like people who play competitive open Great League Bring 6 formats are somehow not great battlers. They are. They're probably better than me. But I just don't find that is the real, I don't think that's the real intent as far as what they want the best Pokemon Go players to look like and be. And I also just don't think it really inhabits the spirit of the game in the way that you've described yourself, where you should play the whole game, and that should be part of the experience and part of the tournament.
When I first started playing, you know, during Go Battle League, there was no typings. It wouldn't show, and it wouldn't say very effective or not effective, that kind of stuff. So I kind of like that better. And the reason I'm saying this is because you could roll up with Pseudo Voodoo, right? And everybody thinks it's freaking grass or something. So they bring in fire types and they try to throw fire, and they just fun types. And you can use off meta picks way more often because they're not gonna know what typing it is. So I kind of like that. And then I think it addresses your concern when you mentioned about watching VGC, you know, and then how more complex that is compared to Go Battle League, because I feel like that would just add more complexity if you would actually have to know all, 350 Pokemon or something at this point?
Yeah, there's plenty of ways to bridge that gap, and I don't want people to think that I'm saying that for Pokemon Go PvP to be a successful and viable game, it has to be the level of complexity that VGC brings. That's nonsense. VGC is one of the most complex, especially doubles. It's some of the most complex gameplay in any game imaginable. But it is worth considering that we are in the same category to an extent, and the best way to capture folks is you have to understand that Pokemon Go PvP probably is never going to be competition with either VGC or TCG. You're probably never going to convince those players to move over because the game is just not as it's not as rewarding when it comes to complex play patterns. But where it does position well is as a fun, lighter version of those things, something that's accessible, something that can be the gateway into competitive Pokemon play for folks who would have never imagined playing competitive Pokemon. And I think the more that you highlight how Go is different and unique from the other stuff, the better positioned Go is to have a healthy lifespan as a competitive game. The more you try and make Go PvP look and feel and be like main series PvP, the harder it is for Go to compete because it'll never be complex enough. It'll never be able to do that. And I don't think it's serving the purposes of the game to do that. I think honestly, what makes Go PvP great is that suddenly this inventory of 4,000 Pokemon I have, many of them are now usable. It used to be that you had just Dex filler and just filler. It's like, well, I'm going to keep one of these. And now it's like, well, a good chunk of my roster is viable somewhere. I could do something with it. And I think that has been really the big win for PvP as far as why Niantic cares about it, is that it is a really, really good tool to engage players who wanted to scratch a competitive itch. And it's greatly increased the number of Pokemon in the game that are now desirable, right? Everything in the game is an asset. It's a resource to be managed by us and by them. And they have to maintain scarcity. They have to maintain value. They have to do all of this because if at any point that equation is off, people will stop playing the game. PvP increased the value tenfold of a bunch of Pokemon that were previously useless. Once there was a time when a Sableye in an event would be absolutely useless. You're like, do I have a shiny? Okay, well, I guess I'm done with Sableye forever. Now, putting Sableye into an event increases the value of that event for a huge portion of their player base a ton. And that is really where, when people ask why is Niantic even interested in working on this feature, I think it's because what they've proven now is that PvP value translates across the board, and it is extremely important that we continue to find ways to make Pokemon more valuable, because otherwise this game's economy dies. It is really hard to get people fired up about Pokemon when they're valueless beyond a certain point.
Is there anything else you want to bring up before we wrap it up?
Play the game when it makes you happy. Don't play the game when it makes you sad. I know a lot of what we do on social media is complain. That's what gets the likes and the retweets. But like, I encourage folks to evaluate their relationship with the game in particular, or anything that you spend a lot of time and energy on, and make sure that it actually is bringing you joy. And the more you can embody that, both publicly and across social media and in your communities, the more fun you're going to have, and the less miserable you're going to be. Because honestly, if all you've got to say about Pokemon Go is that it's making you miserable, then I don't really know why you're still playing it.
Very well said. Where could people find you right now? Do you have like an actual schedule that you stick to, or anything like that?
Yeah. So Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, it's all the same username. So Alfindeol on any of those platforms, you'll find me. I do stream primarily. Most of my content is Twitch. That's where I got my start. And that's kind of mostly what I do. My YouTube is primarily Twitch highlights. And I stream every weekday from about noon until about 5 to 6 Pacific, so sort of the middle of the day. I tend to stream Friday nights. We do a lot of silly Pokemon Go related games. We play some drinking games. We do a lot of trading. Those are sort of more social community streams. But all that is also posted on my Twitch channel as well. So if you go there, you can find my full schedule, and I do my best to stick to that schedule daily.
Wait. You can actually drink on stream on Twitch?
Yeah.
You can have alcohol?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. There are some rules. I happily will give you those if we can make that another thing. But yes, you are allowed to drink on Twitch. It is legal to drink, as long as you're of course of age, and everyone drinking is of age. There are some rules around the amount you can drink and how you can drink. But playing a drinking game on stream is within the Twitch terms of service. So
I have to look it up. I'm interested.
Yeah, we do one called Trade Wars, where basically we trade and we keep track of the scores, and we do shots when we get luckies. That's basically it. It's a good time.
Idea. I wanted
that. A lot
that.
of fun.
That would be pretty cool. Yeah, I like that idea. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I had a good time. I hope we can find some time to do another one of these or some more collabs. We stream at almost the same time, so we should probably find a way to work together again.
We definitely will. And guys, thank you so much for watching. If you're watching, don't forget, you can actually listen. If you're listening, you can actually watch. So just scroll down. All of Alfindeol's information is below, and all of the streams and the Twitch and everything is also below. So make sure to do that now. And thank you so much for tuning in, guys. See you the next time.